Welcome to Rich Conversations. Today we'll chat with Matthew Manning. I'm super excited to share this with you guys. We met up at Build Coffee in Hyde Park and just had a fantastic conversation. I'm so happy that you'll be able to listen to this. You can follow Matthew at Matthew R. Manning and at Gumbo_Media. Let's begin. All right, so we got Matthew here.
Hello, hello.
Do you usually go by Matt or Matthew?
You know, I've been introducing myself in recent years as Matthew. I feel more like a Matthew. I don't feel like a Matt. But what's funny about that is everybody from high school back calls me Matt, including my family, including a lot of my oldest friends. And so, like, the most important people in my life call me Matt, even though I feel like a Matthew.
Okay.
But basically, since college on, I've been introducing myself as Matthew. I'll answer to anything, though.
Yeah. So how long have you been in Chicago for?
In total, about 8-9 years now. I came first in undergrad, which was, 2009, fall of 2009. So it's just past the 10-year mark. But I did go back to Minneapolis for about 2 years right after graduation in 2013, where I worked in architecture, started building some more of my nonprofit stuff. And then after a couple years of being there, I had been with my now fiance for a couple of years already. We decided we wanted to shift, and Chicago felt like the best place to move back because it was still home for me, honestly, more than Minneapolis was at that point after my 4 years in college. So now I've been here for another 4 or so years. So it's been almost a decade in Chicago.
Wow. So what neighborhood are you in right now?
Right now I'm in Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago, which I love. And been in Hyde Park now for about 2.5 years. When I first moved back here, I went to the Lakeview area, which is obviously the general area of north side Chicago that I was most familiar with after my 4 years at DePaul University, which was all, I kind of split my time between Lincoln Park and Lakeview, right along Broadway / Clark Street for the few years that I was there. So after a couple years there, after moving back, decided we needed to be around. For us, it was a little bit around be more of our kind of cultural pulse, specifically as, Black Americans, and especially in a city like Chicago, and with the work that we're doing to, serve our community, our Black community here in Chicago and really across the world. We felt like it was also important that we rooted ourselves a little bit more in it, and it's been great. We don't plan to go anywhere anytime soon. Double down.
Yeah, man.
Signed a long lease, so we'll be here for a while.
How would you describe Hyde Park?
How would I describe Hyde Park? Historic, for one. Mm-hmm. Very historic neighborhood. Lots of history here in many different ways. Communally, in terms of kind of familial roots, even familial wealth and things of that nature. But what's powerful about it is that a lot of it is still rooted in the Black community. So Hyde Park defies a lot of what people assume of the South Side. I don't want to say it's an exception to the rule because there are many exceptions, and a lot of times the rules are skewed to begin with. Yeah. But this area certainly is a hidden gem, and a lot of people don't realize it exists, beyond kind of its connection to the University of Chicago and things of that nature. Yeah. But it's also very diverse. You'll find a lot of different types of people here of all ages, all kind of backgrounds, demographics, a lot of immigrants in this area as well. It reminds me a lot of Rogers Park, but with a quieter kind of domestic feel. A lot of parks, still close proximity to the lake. So it's a really cool kind of eclectic vibe. Very arts-based. You'll find a lot of artists here, a lot of small studios and stuff like that. And a lot of artists eventually moved to this area, I found, at least out of my connections and friends that live here in Chicago. So I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it.
I once went to Mass over here.
Okay.
I forget the name of the church, but it was the most diverse group of people at Mass I've ever seen.
That's what you get when you walk around this community.
Yeah.
I mean, just walk down 53rd Street, kind of the downtown, quote-unquote, area of Hyde Park on a Friday or a Saturday or Sunday, and you'll see just that. I mean, whether it's a coffee shop or it's the bank, everybody that is in there reflects different elements of Chicago. And so I feel like it's a really great way to kind of get get a taste for what Chicago is in terms of its people, in terms of its community and its vibrancy. And so that's what I really appreciate about it.
You mentioned it a little bit before. Elaborate on some of the work you're doing right now.
So I'm doing a few things, but mostly it's all anchored around what is called Gumbo Media. It's a multimedia platform and company, kind of a storytelling platform that has existed now for about 2.5 years, almost 3. And essentially Gumbo Media curates content, so storytelling content, curates experiences, various programs, both large and small, and curates opportunities and like to services, contracts with different clients, stuff like that, all with the intention of expanding the narrative of Black life. So it's really a platform and a pipeline that exists to bridge gaps and barriers in representation. And in a city like Chicago, those are vast. When we hear about the narratives that exist here and on the south side of Chicago, where we currently are having this conversation, you hear a lot of negatives, you hear a lot of tropes, you hear a lot of these things that people often associate with the city. And while some of those elements are present and certainly, are important to pay attention to and resolve in sustainable and conscientious ways, there's so much more here that we're not looking at. And I think generally that's true of just Black life, not just in this country, but around the world. And so when you look at, media and kind of the media landscape at large, and you look at the representation of Black folks, 2 very common narratives exist. I'm not saying they're the only ones, but 2 very common ones are entertainment, kind of celebrity-centric models, and then the monoliths, the stereotypes, the news cycles that are just toxic and do a lot of disservice to representation of what our communities are like. And there's no level of nuance or complexity there. So our goal is to really enrich that, change those narratives, change those landscapes by building communities and then inviting people to be themselves, inviting people to tell their own story, So that's kind
awesome.
That's the anchor of what I'm doing. And then around that, some brand consulting and working on my own writing as a career, which, hoping to make as sustainable as possible. So that can always kind of be my core, and then build and do other communal things around that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Appreciate that.
So if you have an open Saturday, how would you spend it?
Honestly, I'm kind of a hermit. I really enjoy engaging in the outdoors. So anything I can do to spend some time outdoors, say by the lake. Courtney, my fiance, and I, and also my co-founder, we've made a conscious effort to live as close as we can to the lake. So we've always kind of been in east neighborhoods. So even in Hyde Park, we're in East Hyde Park. We're a little bit further west now, but Lakeview, we were in East Lakeview. And the goal for us being, we get life by going to, the water and just taking a walk, just being able to take a walk. Now we're doing a lot of running down there as well. We have kind of a fitness community that we've built out as an extension of Gumbo. So I love doing those things, I really do. I get enjoyment out of engaging with nature in a quiet way that has there's no agenda, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing to accomplish. It's just explore, be free. Beyond that, though, it's really being quiet. It's reading, it's writing. I'm a writer, so I love to write. And when I feel like I can't write, I read as much as I can, absorb as many words as I can. You're very similar in that way, I imagine, at least from what I know of you. And so I love just having a quiet Saturday where I can hang out, chill.
What kind of books are you reading right now?
I've been most compelled. I've read a lot of nonfiction of late, including some very kind of journalistic stuff, and so some of it has been very dense. And so things like, We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates. That was a very dense one that took me some time to get through. The Other Westmore by Westmore, which is a story kind of around Baltimore, and a lot of these are around identity and things of that nature. So my go-to, I would say, is memoir, or at least kind of essayist writing, reflective writing in some way that comments on identity, comments on the intersections of identity, kind of building a life for yourself, interpersonal engagements, all that type of stuff. Right now, I'm a bit jaded from a lot of that, just because I've read so much of it that I'm trying to pick up some fiction stories and just dive into someone else's world.
What kind of fiction
ours.
Stories does Matthew read?
It really runs the gamut. I'm forgetting the name of. It's actually Ta-Nehisi Coates' new book that I ordered. It's the water dancer, I think it is called.
Okay.
Which is it's interesting because it engages in a lot of the same themes. It engages with themes of slavery and all sorts of stuff. But it's somewhat of a reprieve in that it allows me to dive into another type of world.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to avoid. I don't want to say content with substance, because I think all content has substance in some capacity, but content that has substance to my life and to my
and what
own
you're working towards.
Exactly. I want to always be strengthened by what I'm reading. So regardless of what book I'm diving into, even if it's just some kind of adventure thing, like I remember growing up, I read like the Aragon series and like about dragons and stuff, right? Like I've always loved diving into other worlds, but I always want to be improved by it in some way, especially as I've grown older. So there's still identity focused and identity based, but I also like reading people's experiences of, honest experiences of maybe somebody has lost a loved one. How do they manage that? Those human questions that continue to kind of linger in me are the things I love to explore.
I look at it this way. When I read, I try to find puzzle pieces. So I picture life as this big puzzle.
Sure.
And my goal is to keep finding and acquiring puzzle pieces.
Unlock a new one, yeah.
And so each book I try to find a puzzle piece.
Yeah, I feel that a lot. That resonates a lot. Yeah, I would say I subscribe to that as well.
Yeah.
I want to continue to unlock those pieces and make more sense of everything. One thing I changed. I'm writing very frequently right now, and doing it on Medium, which has been a great way for me to get my own writing out, to a readership that's already baked in, and then try to build my own kind of identity around that. And one thing that I've been saying is that I'm doing my best to seek the truth and to make it plain. And I feel like, in a similar way, that's what you're talking about, right? It's finding those new pieces, finding those new truths, and then finding the ways to distill them and make them plain for my own life and how to approach those. So it's very sponge-like reading, absorb as much as I can.
When you think of Chicago, what colors do you imagine first?
I think I imagine blue. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because I've always been so close to the lake. Or maybe it's because right now my existence in Chicago is very fluid. It's very airy. There's something just very peaceful and almost tacit about blue as a color. I mean, just color psychology, color theory says that much, but that's the tone I get. Either that or an autumnal palette, something very rich. Because that's the community I'm a part of right now. That's the community I'm building, and maybe that's also because that's the season we're in. But blue is what pops into my head first. I don't know. It's also in our flag, I suppose. But yeah, there's something very fluid about my existence in Chicago right now. And it feels very peaceful. I feel very content in it. It feels very purposeful. And all of those things to me register as blue.
Blue?
Yeah.
What's your proudest moment as a Chicagoan?
My proudest moment as a Chicagoan, honestly, would have to be kind of where I am right now with the work that I'm doing with Gumbo Media. We have labored for a couple of years now to really be intentional about building community in a way where people feel seen, where people feel heard, in a way that fills gaps that folks have felt in their own lives. And I feel like we're doing that. I feel like the tides are starting to turn in the way that people kind of engage with our platform, and the way people use our platform as a way to center themselves and their lives and their mental health even, and physical health in terms of some of the other things that we're getting into. And I'm proud of the community I've cultivated and fostered. I'm proud that, I have connections that, maybe haven't seen someone like yourself since 2012, right? But we can still sit down and have a conversation. And I'm really proud of that community, both within kind of my black community and beyond that. I feel really good about that. I feel really proud about that.
It's great that you can say, you're currently living your proudest moment.
Yeah,
that's
I really am.
Something
I really
to
feel
say.
that way. And I'm also very well aware that I'm in the middle of it, too.
Yeah.
That it'll be interesting to see how that shifts, and that's something I'm really excited about.
If someone were to visit you from out of town, what restaurant would you take them to?
So this would have been a different answer even 3 years ago.
Okay.
I've been plant-based, much like my brother Gary Presley. He was actually a big inspiration for me for about 2 years now. And so I can't eat in a lot of the same places I used to. But there are a few go-tos for me. Sultan's Market is a big one. I love Sultan's. I love Mediterranean food, and their falafel is off the charts. I could go into detail about the falafel, but I won't. But so Sultan's Market is a big one, either the one in Wicker or the one in Lincoln Park. Both are great. The Gab's Kitchen is another one, which is not far from where we are here in Hyde Park. It's kind of an entire vegan eats kitchen. It's not really a specific style. I mean, they'll have anything from fried rice to, a burger to salads and smoothies, and but it's all kind of plant-based eating, and it's delicious. It's also kind of mom and pop type place, so I really appreciate that. Chicago Diner is a great staple. Anyone can enjoy it. Obviously mostly vegetarian and vegan food, so great place for me to be able to go and get some good meals out of it. I think those would probably be Uncle Joe's Jerk, which is off. It's right by my house, right near. I think is it 49th? I think it's 49th. It's a Jamaican spot, and you get a whole plate for like $10. And it's more than you can eat, and it's all insanely good. And they have a veggie plate that I get now too.
Okay.
They just serve it up in kind of a little box, and then out you go. And it's always full.
Ahmad Williams was on my podcast, and right afterwards he was like, "Oh shoot, I forgot to tell you about this Caribbean jerk in Hyde Park." Because he's from like the Caribbean or his family, and he was like, "That's the best. Yeah, that's the best spot."
Uncle Joe's is the truth, for sure. It's delicious. Yeah.
What's your hidden gem in the city?
So this has changed a little bit as well, because when I was living on the north side, there were a lot of hidden gems I liked, like on DePaul's campus. Like I love that little Vincentian circle, kind of between the library and the SAC, as the building is called. And I used to go a lot of times I used to go there kind of at night and just sit there and put music on, lean up against St. Vincent, and just chill. I found a lot of serenity there. But now it might be in Jackson Park, in all of our kind of walking and running around the Hyde Park area, both through our run club as well as just kind of casually. We've explored a lot of different areas, and there's a really beautiful trail in Jackson Park that's like wood chips, and it goes off kind of this path. And if you walk all the way around it, it spits you out by the Osaka Gardens, which is like a Japanese garden, and lily pads and just beautiful little streams and mini waterfalls, and it's just a super quiet, peaceful place. A lot of bikes and dogs and all sorts of stuff aren't really allowed in there, so it's very quiet. Not that I have anything against bikes or dogs. I have them both and I love them both. But it's just a very quiet, peaceful place that a lot of people don't really know about, and there's really only one of two ways to get in and find it. Yeah. And it's kind of right in the middle of this path, off-beaten path, I should say, in the middle of Jackson Park. So I think that's a really kind of cool place. Okay. And anytime we take a stroll, we try to walk past there and stop in, just relax.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I love it.
What sound do you most affiliate with Chicago?
I think this goes along with blue as a color, but it might be wind.
Wind?
It might be wind.
Okay.
I don't know if you've gotten that answer before, but again, this might be because I'm so close to the lake, but right now I'm also living on a third. It's like a walk-up building, private owner, and we're on the third floor. And we have a lot of beautiful windows, so we get sunlight all day, but we're in the middle of just a swath of trees. And so we just see them, they catch all the wind, and we see them blow and sway every day. It's a beautiful way to wake up. It's a beautiful way to, just kind of be peaceful in your own home, and nobody can see in or anything. It's a really beautiful space, but because of that, I've been very perceptive of the wind. You hear it in the kind of creak through the old building, but you also see it through the trees. And with a lot of the time I've been spending down by the lake, especially running on Wednesday evenings and Saturday mornings. I've been doing these long runs, because I just ran the marathon a week ago. And so I've been doing all these early morning runs at, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's just me and, the water. I guess the water would be another sound. So basically I would say the water and the wind are two sounds that I've been very perceptive to of late.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What music has influenced you the most during your time here?
The music that has influenced me most, it's kind of a twofold answer. by far the most I've been influenced is through hip hop. Chicago is just so rich and vibrant in terms of its hip hop scene. I've seen so many artists literally emerge as national and international artists out of the city while living in the city in the 10 years that I've been here. And then the few that came right before, you know, the legends before were people like Kanye and Common and Lupe Fiasco and Twista and all those types of those are the types of sounds sonically that I really resonated with. Very like soulful hooks, soulful beats, and soulful lyricism. You know, it had purpose, it had substance, but it also made you feel good. And so those sounds are very nostalgic, but then also seeing the Saba Pivots and the Mick Jenkins and the Chance the Rappers rise in the last, 5-10 years out of the city while I've been here has been really powerful to see, especially now that I'm kind of closer to, or I'm in similar circles, right? I wouldn't say as those people, but specifically as from the communities that are from which that type of talent is emerging. You know, the poetry circles and the photography circles and just the creative artist circles of Chicago. So that's been by and large, the biggest impact for me. I would say though, gospel music has had a big impact on me while living here in Chicago, specifically because I was part of the gospel choir while I was at DePaul, which I loved. I did that every Monday morning before going to DMAC, DePaul Men's Acapella, which I was also in. Before going to that rehearsal, I was in gospel choir, and so I spent 3 hours a week doing that, and then sometimes recordings or just like concerts and stuff on the weekends. But that music was just so deeply rooted, so communally rooted, and spiritual in a way that really impacted me and kind of laid a foundation for the community that I've built here in Chicago. So that one's a little bit more nostalgic for my college years, but I would be lying if I said they didn't have
but it's something that's
informative
like
impact on me.
You.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, it still has an impact on me to the point where, even though, ideologically and theologically, my identity has shifted quite a bit since my college years. I'm still a deeply spiritual person. I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a religious person. I'm still very nostalgic for that music, and I listen to it often. There's something home about it, and that, to be fair, that comes far before DePaul as well, but participating in it really cemented that kind of as part of my DNA, and so I love that as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's a common scene you see in your daily interaction with the city?
A common scene I see in my daily interaction with the city. For me, the city is all about people. It's all about community. The way people kind of engage and interact with each other, for me, has always been really interesting. There's so many unique spirits here in Chicago. I think Chicago has kind of a unique DNA in that it's a Midwestern city, so there's a quietness to it, at least when you compare it to a place like New York or something like that. And yet there's something very gritty and honest about the city.
Yeah.
And so I feel like those interactions in all of their different kind of manifestations, whether it's just, checking out at the counter with whoever and getting into an honest conversation in the 2 minutes that I'm there, or standing at the bus stop, or just taking a walk, those interactions and engagements are something that have been a consistent for me in all my years here, but especially here on the South Side. There's something almost sheltered. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing, it might be a different question, but I certainly think there are benefits to it to an extent where there's something very comforting about this community, and this community feels it feels that pocket. It feels that it's in this kind of I wouldn't say sheltered bubble, but in its bubble, right? And
it's like an incubator.
Yes,
or something like that.
That's a great way to frame it. Yeah. So I feel like the interactions here are very honest and very kind. So that would be my biggest interaction. There is the standard, like, every day in Chicago you're going to hear horns, you're going to hear people honking, and hear somebody yelling out something random or strange, and that's something that has become just white noise at this point. Like, I almost can't live without it. I love that sound and kind of the sonics of Chicago, or really any big city. So that would be another one, but I'd say the more purposeful answer would be, honestly, the interactions I'm having on a day-to-day basis, or that I'm just witnessing.
This might be along the same lines, but if you were given secret information that Chicago would be destroyed in a week, what's one quality you would choose to keep to rebuild the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me the answer is along the same lines in that it would be that grit that I was talking about. There's something about Chicago, man. I don't know. It's a lot of cities have grit, but there's something about, it's even that whole second city framing, right? Like there's always been a kind of underdog mentality in Chicago that's embraced in a way,
yeah,
and also not believed at the same time. If that makes sense. Like there's that weird kind of
totally.
dynamic. Like we know how dope we are here, but we're also fine just being in our own world. Like we don't need anybody else's approval to know that, if that makes sense. And I feel like that's a very Chicago energy, and I love that energy. We've been, me and my fiance have been thinking about, what comes next after Chicago. We've doubled down on our, on our lease and everything. We'll be here for a couple years at least, especially while we're building our business. But we were thinking, okay, after this, do we want to stay here? Do we want to go to New York? Do we want to go to LA? Do we want to go to Stockholm, which is where I'm originally from? And what always feels off about any of those places is the energy. Some of them are a little bit too active, a little bit too robust. Some of them are a little bit too lax. Chicago just fits that pocket where it's like you get, again, that kind of good, relaxed Midwestern vibe, but everybody here has a mission. Everybody here has a passion. Everybody here is doing something.
Yeah.
And I love that. And so I would want to keep that grit. I wouldn't want to lose that. And because I feel like that's the backbone of who we are as Chicagoans. Whether we've been here a couple years or several years, that's why people stay. They love the energy here.
Yeah. That's something I've been thinking about a lot recently. It doesn't have the energy of New York, and it's not lax like LA, but it's like almost like the most balanced city.
It feels really balanced,
and that's kind of like what I need in life.
I agree. I'm 1,000%. I'm somebody who's very quiet. I thrive off interactions with people, but I intentionally do not surround myself with a lot of people beyond my own kind of community that I have to build through the business ventures and stuff that I'm doing, programs, events, stuff like that. I'm not a socialite. I'm not somebody who goes out and, parties or even really goes to bars or anything. I love food. I love intentional conversations. I'll sit down and, have a conversation over coffee any day, literally any day. I love doing that. But I'm not somebody who's super energetic in terms of the energy that I give out to people, and because of that, I need that balance. I need the space that is quiet, that fits my personality, but I also need a space that has enough going on that will also push me out of my innate comfort zone and engage me with other people and other communities in important ways. So that balance works really well for me, as I imagine it does for other people in different ways. But that's definitely one of the reasons I'm still here. Nothing else has just felt right. And I talk about that with my fiance all the time. Almost any city we go to, I make an assessment in the first few days that I'm there. Like, is this a city where I feel like I could live? And Chicago might be one of 2 cities in the world where I've said yes. Stockholm, my original home, being the other one. Even a place like Minneapolis, where I grew up, is too much of kind of that quiet, lax energy. It's great for like a vacation now, or like taking a couple, weeks to visit family over the holidays or something. But after a while, I'm like, there's not enough happening here. I don't think that's true, but the energy here isn't inspiring me in the same way it does in Chicago for me. And so, even past homes don't feel like home in the way that Chicago does.
Yeah. What's one small thing you would do to improve your neighborhood or the city as a whole?
One small thing I would do to improve my city or neighborhood. In some ways, I kind of have 2 answers to this. In some ways, I feel like one of the things that I would do, I'm somewhat engaged in doing, or at least attempting to do, which is kind of this fostering, this stewarding of community, trying to build as many intentional spaces as I can where people can just be. It doesn't always have to have an agenda. Like on Thursday, we have a game night. It's literally people come, we have access to an incubator space, which is in Bronzeville too. So it's like you're coming, to Bronzeville, into the community, not out of it. Disconnect, put your phone down. Let's play some Uno or Yahtzee or Twister, whatever we want to do. That type of space I think is really intentional, and that's something I think this city needs more of, especially in ways that are bridging, because this is one of the most segregated cities in the country and in the world. There are many people in this very city that have lived here their entire lives and never really even been to Hyde Park or any part of the South Side. I mean, Hyde Park is still a very privileged community, it should be noted, and I'm well aware of that. And it's also near South. It's not deep South at all. I mean, Chicago goes so far south and so far west. We never even talk about the west side. And so I feel like I forgot the initial question. I'm sorry.
What's one small thing you do?
One small thing I would change. Okay, so the community is a big piece of that. In terms of even smaller scale, I would want to see more art. And Chicago already has a lot of art, but I want to, like the free little libraries people assemble and put up.
Yeah.
We have one right in front of our house.
Okay.
It just happened to be there from our neighbors, which I love. And because I'm reading and writing so much, I'm like constantly dropping books in there and picking up other books. And that's where I pull up a lot of random books, so I don't know a lot of the titles I have on my bookshelf because they just looked interesting and kind of on a whim.
Do your book libraries, do they have good books in there? Because some of mine, man, there's not a good selection.
It ebbs and flows for sure. I mean, I would say generally there's a really good selection. We have a high school right by us, we have a middle school right by us, and we have an elementary school. So there's constantly people walking past from all three kind of subsets, including their parents and all that type of stuff. And then there's some people that I see come by, pick up all the books, come back the next day, drop off all their books. So
That's cool.
There's a lot of circulation. Sometimes though, like every few months, it just stagnates for like a month.
Okay.
And not a single book is picked up. And I think the owners, I've noticed, I was wondering what was happening, but I noticed that they would flip out books that they have inside their house. So they would actually come out when it stagnates and flip it out. So, but for the most part, yes, there are some really good gems in there. And any book I drop, it's gone within a couple hours, which is one thing I love about Chicago. Chicago will always react, But I would want to build more of those moments, whether it's small kind of free-flowing art exhibitions on the street or small moments to engage with literature or just creative artistic moments that people can engage with when they walk outside of their house or just walk down the street in whatever form, murals, free libraries, all that type of stuff. I love those little moments, and I would want to build as many of those as I could. Chicago Ideas actually did something recently, I think in partnership with the Park District and the mayoral office, but they had did you see the yellow stages that they put up in different parks around the city?
I don't think so.
They put up
yellow stages?
Yeah, well, Chicago Ideas is their colors, yellow, yeah. And so they put up a bunch of stages around the city in parks, and they did kind of impromptu programming. Okay. And so they, different people would come up and perform and share ideas about how to improve the city, and it was very free flowing, almost like spoken word format of approaching kind of community engagement and community development. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't know what the end result was, I don't know how effective it was. I don't know any of that. I love the Chicago Ideas folks, but I think that level of thinking would be maybe an interesting way to get different types of creative minds reflecting their view of the city as well, as opposed to just the muralists and the sculptors. I thought that was creative, though. I thought that was an interesting idea.
When people learn you're from Chicago, how do they respond, and what's your reaction?
It really depends on who I'm talking to and how specific I get. If I'm just talking about Chicago, honestly, people are really excited by meeting somebody from Chicago. I think it's one of those, it may be one of the least talked about, at least in terms of a super big global scale, in terms of a global city. When I think of global cities in the U.S., I think LA, New York, and Chicago. There are others like Atlanta, maybe Houston, Minneapolis to a much smaller degree, but I think Chicago is, it's right in the middle. It's not a city people really get to. A lot of people, especially if they're coming overseas or if they're from other cities, they're going into other places. They're going to the New Yorks, the LAs, the Miamis, or whatever, what have you. So I think people are really excited is the reaction I get most frequently. They have a lot of questions about, the bean and whatever other kind of touristy things you can think of, which is fun. It's fun to engage with. I love being able to represent the city of Chicago, even if their perception of Chicago is very limiting, But I also love to expand that. So that's a big part. If I'm in kind of music circles, people do talk about the music. I mean, people who know hip-hop, for example, they do not sleep on Chicago. They know that Chicago breeds some of the best talent in the world. So that's a big point of conversation. Sometimes if I'm getting into detail about kind of where I'm living, and I'm living on the south side of Chicago, sometimes I do have to combat stereotypes, about violence and things of that nature, which I'm happy to do as well. That's
what are those conversations like?
Honestly, I don't think they're contentious at all. I think it's rooted in just, in just naivety. People don't understand and they don't know. I think they go by what they hear in the news. And all we hear anybody talk about when they talk about not Chicago at large, but specifically south side of Chicago. And again, this excludes, in narratives form, it excludes west side often too, which is interesting. But it's violence. It's like, oh, it's the murder capital of the world. And when you look at statistics, that's not even true per capita. It's like 6th or 7th, right? And there are a lot of other cities that have worse problems that are rapidly increasing, and there's also a lot of nuance to those conversations. And so it's not necessarily about refuting what they're saying. It's about finding more complex ways to have those conversations, about having people better understand the very long, and tenuous relationship that Chicago has with various minority populations. People don't realize like redlining and bombings and white flight, all those things were done here, but also done legally, or if not legally, at least accepted, as the norm. And there's a reason why our communities are constructed as they are. There's a reason why populations live as they do, including places like Chinatown. It's not just a whole bunch of people with similar backgrounds or ideologies or ethnicities coming together to live in the same community. Certainly that might be part of it, but there were other factors at play that positioned people and kind of put people in the same location and limited their resources in equal ways. And so when I'm having those conversations, it's usually never, strained or tenuous in any way. It's just about broadening their lens of how they talk about Chicago, recognizing that Chicago, just like any other place anywhere in the world, is complex, has nuances. There's a reason why things exist as they do, but it's also important that they recognize that their lens, however true or untrue it may be, is still just a small part of a much broader picture. So I enjoy having those conversations, depending on who it's with. Some people it's not even worth entertaining sometimes, to be honest, because I think some people are very fixed in their, the way that they think. And I want to be expanded when I speak to somebody. I want others to be willing to be expanded in themselves. And I think as long as that energy is there, like, let's go for it.
When you feel overwhelmed or you need a mental escape, where do you go to clear your mind?
I either go internal, meaning I might not do anything. I might say, you know what? I've been having meetings. There's so much I'm doing. I'm answering so many emails. I'm just going to sit on the couch and read a book, or sit on the couch and watch Netflix, or whatever it might be. Like, sometimes it means tapping out completely and just being in a reflective place. I'm an innately hyper reflective person to a fault, I think, sometimes anyway. But I've learned to appreciate and love that about myself. So if I really need a break, I'll go there. Outside of that, though, if it's just I'm a bit flustered or overwhelmed, or I just need to switch the energy up, it really is the lake. It's let me go take a walk, or maybe even a run, and just go sit by the water for a while. I'll often walk, my fiance and I sometimes, and we'll be in the same place. I think the energy will be sensed in the house. I think it'll be kind of a collective energy, and it's just like, yeah, we need a walk today, and then we'll head out and we'll go take a walk. So I would say one of those two are definitely usually the way that I engage. I would love to say that I can take a trip and go somewhere. I'm not quite at the place where I can just pick up and do that at any point, largely because of responsibilities and partly because of finances. It's expensive, and I'm living a very freelance entrepreneurial life, so a lot of things are piecemeal these days, but there are little mini retreats we can take within the city, including within my own home, and so I try to do that as much as I can.
I'm really excited about this next question.
Yeah.
What's something you're curious about recently?
Something I'm curious about recently. It's a great question. And I've been thinking about it for a while. And I'm still not sure. I'm curious about so many things so often, to be honest. I think one thing I've really been musing on, which maybe goes in line with Chicago and the larger conversation on Chicago we've been having, is kind of what the future of arts looks like in Chicago.
The future of what?
Of art. what that looks like here in Chicago. Chicago is one of those cities where there's such a burgeoning, and it's been burgeoning for a while now, for like the last decade, especially 5 years, even more. But there's such a burgeoning kind of art scene here, creative renaissance happening. Again, they've always been relevant here, but when you look at the artists that are rising here, when you look at the photographers that are coming out of this area and starting to do photo shoots for all sorts of different people all over the world, when you look at the companies that are rising out of this area, including our own and including folks like the Tribe, and I mean, there's just, it feels, and maybe this is just the world that I'm in, you know, maybe this me in my own bubble seeing and sensing a lot because it's the world that I have to be in professionally, but I feel like there's a lot happening in the city, and I'm really curious to see what role Chicago plays in kind of national conversations around really just about anything that has to do with the United States in the next 5 to 10 years, and more long term in the next 20 years, right? Yeah. Like, I feel like Chicago is going to have much more of a role similar to what like New York has been, the role New York has played. I don't think it'll ever be a New York in the sense that it's not the first thing you see when you come from Europe. It's not kind of the gateway to the US, right? But in terms of influence, I feel like Chicago is rising in a really powerful way. And I've been really curious about that. I'm really almost anxious about like what role does Chicago play in the future of the U.S. and our kind of collective, holistic influence on the world, because I feel like we're beginning to have more and more of an impact on the U.S. and who has the biggest impact on the world, you know, culturally, socially, creatively, more than the U.S. right? And so that's something that I've been stirring on quite a bit. So yeah, I don't know if that's a sufficient answer, but for me, it's something. It's probably the most honest answer, because something I'm thinking about a lot, especially because I'm building community here. That's my whole job. So it's like, what role will this community play moving forward? You know? Yeah, I'm really curious about that.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel that same energy?
I do. I've found that over the past like year or two, I've like looked around and been like, oh wow, I'm surrounded by a lot of talented people.
Right. Exactly.
This is
undeniable.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is really awesome. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And supportive people, like not just talented, but very supportive people as well.
Yeah. There's something very nurturing about the community here. We're all like, it's like we're all rooting for each other because of where we are and where we're from. Right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, exactly. And I don't know how else to articulate that, but I'm excited to see where that goes and what that leads to.
Yeah. Within the past 5 years, what personal realization has improved your outlook on life the most?
Personal realization. I'm trying to stray from answering all of these questions with multiple answers, which is just the way my mind thinks, because it goes in so many different directions. Honestly, the biggest, which is more of an affirmation than like a lesson, is just the value and the brilliance in community. Not to be redundant with what I've said before, but you know, before there were projects that I did at DePaul and they were all kind of community oriented and stuff, but I enjoyed kind of cultivating community, seeing what came from it and seeing the talents that were there. But I've been really affirmed as of late of just how powerful our community is. All of our communities, like all our diverse, rich kind of palette of Chicago, when we come together and work creatively. And I'm seeing more and more of those communities kind of pop up. And so I'm really compelled by that. And that's been a rewarding lesson for me. And you know what? Actually, here's how I'll answer it. What that's taught me is, when I was at DePaul, because I was kind of a young entrepreneur, I was doing, like, I spoke at like the Winter Leadership Conference, I was in DMAC, I was in Gospel, you know, I had my own nonprofit. Like, a lot of these things came at a young age. Not a lot of them, you know, were, you know, super great things necessarily. I mean, they weren't bad things, but it was just like, I was young, I was naive, I didn't fully know what I was doing with my nonprofit. I knew nothing about business, you know, but even just having those involvements on campus at a young age, I got a fair amount of, like, I got a fair amount of attention while on campus. And honestly, I think what I learned about myself is that I didn't like that. And what I mean by that is, I don't like being I don't mind speaking and like, engaging with folks. I find a lot of purpose and value in that, and I love having, again, those, as long as I can make them as intimate as possible, having those engagements with folks. But what I learned in all of that is that in this kind of spirit of building community, I prefer to be behind the scenes. I learned that even though I was an entrepreneur, even though I was constantly kind of in front of people, the space where I thrived was like nobody knows who I am. Okay. And I'm building these things like every day now with Gumbo. I'll introduce myself, I'll talk to somebody, and they're like, "Oh, that's you." I had no idea. That would never have happened before. Before, they would have known me first and then known what I was doing through that, right? Okay. And so I love that tonal shift, because what it did for me was, one, a lot of kind of sobering and and humbling energy comes from that. Recognizing my place, knowing what my place is, knowing that I don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of questions, and I love asking them, and I love building community around them. And I honestly don't care if I ever am seen for it or whatever. I just want it to exist. And so I've leaned really heavily into that over the last 5 years, to the point where now and that's impacted my relationships. That's impacted everything. Like I've just become a hermit. Like I'm very quiet. I just kind of keep to myself.
With yourself, and you know who you are.
I'm very comfortable with myself. Yeah, that's a good way of framing it. I mean, I really do think that's where it comes from, and a lot of that honestly comes from writing. I'm a writer. I'm a writer's personality. I'm very quiet. I'm very reserved, but I'm like, my mind is loud constantly. I'm constantly thinking about something, musing on something, answering different questions in my mind or posing new questions. And I think because of that, I've grown very comfortable with just building, working hard, doing what I love, and letting that be enough. All the other chips can fall as they may. I don't care about it. What's for me will come to me. What's not for me will find its way away from me. It's this very kind of fluid, almost spiritual energy that comes with just that drive in doing what I want to do to help impact, make a positive imprint on this world, specifically through my Chicago community.
I feel like I don't even need to ask this last question, but in the future, what are you really excited about and dream about doing?
It is a good question. Because things are changing so fast and so constantly. I'm always amazed at how quickly things continue to shift. I think for me, I'm tempted to answer it from like the business perspective, because it is. Anytime anyone asks me a personal question, I eventually talk about what I'm working on with business, because it's such a part of who I am, and I genuinely, people say you aren't what you do, but like I genuinely feel like I am connected to what I do, because it's that purposeful for me. Like it matters that much to me. So of course I'm curious about where that's going to go. But that actually isn't how I will answer it. I'm curious to see, on a little bit more of a personal note, where my writing goes. I love writing. I want to make it my career, and I want to share my ideas with the world. Really, I don't even know if it's want to share with them with the world. I want to make them plain. It's that seek the truth and make it plain thing from earlier. Yeah. Like I'm trying to seek my own truths, not tell anybody what to think or what to feel or what to do, but just be as have a reckoning with myself, be as honest as I can with myself about masculinity, about race, about identity, about anything, right? Positive and negative, and use that honesty and that self-reflection as a way to improve myself, but hopefully also as a way to hold up a mirror to anybody else that wishes to engage in that conversation. Hopefully they can learn or see something of themselves in the reflection that I've challenged myself to do. And so I want to see how I can continue to utilize that passion, hopefully that skill set, which I've cultivated, through education and just a lot of practice. I've worked really hard at being good at putting words together, specifically written. So I'm curious to see how that vision, because I don't know what it looks like yet. I just know what I want to do. I don't really know what the end goal is. I don't really care what the end goal is. I just know that I want to perfect that means to that goal as much as I can.
You want to express yourself.
I want to express myself as honestly as I can, and with as many people as I can, for the sake of conversation. For the sake of talking in an honest way, having honest discourse about the things that make us human. And so I'm really curious to see where where that goes in the next 5 years. You know,
that's
I think
awesome.
that's the biggest kind of personal thing that's completely outside of, you know, any kind of business venture or any kind of external community. That's really central to who I am, but I think could also have an impact, hopefully, on others along the way. And so, yeah, I'm curious to see where that goes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I've tremendously enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Rich Conversations. Again, you can follow Matthew at Matthew R. Manning and at Gumbo_Media. Have a fulfilling day.